Ladies and gentlemen, good morning once again. With the objective of ensuring that we complete this morning's discussions and learning by 9:30, we're going to proceed with the program. So I'm going to ask you to eat as quietly as possible, but do enjoy and ensure you chew and swallow. As I said in my opening remarks, we are very glad, very grateful to have you join us this morning for this very important discussion on tax compliance in Jamaica. Per the program, Dr. Damian King will now share with you the main findings of the research. And I want to once again just recognize our researchers on this particular project, that being Dr. Patrice Whiteley, who's here with us. Please give her a round of applause. We are happy to celebrate our young researchers. And she was supported by Tamoya Christie. I'd also like you to please welcome with me our chair of the Caribbean Policy Research Institute, Dr. Marshall Hall. He has been with us from our very inception. Thank you for your guidance, Dr. Hall, and constructive feedback, always. And we also want to recognize one of our gold sponsors, that being Pan Jam, Mr. Stephen Facey. Thank you. We're able to have and pursue research of relevance to public policy challenges, such as tax compliance, such as waste management issues, such as National Housing Trust and Housing Solutions for Jamaicans, by virtue of the fact that we have strong support from our gold sponsors, private sector companies that give back to Jamaica through supporting the think tank, the Caribbean Policy Research Institute, where we're committed to evidence-based research to guide better public policy making in Jamaica for really and truly a prosperous country. That's the objective. And so we are thankful for the flexibility that our sponsors allow us to have, and also to then share the findings in forums like this, because this is a way in which we hope to not only share the information, but also ensure that you take it back to your respective organizations and entities and your lives. Because tax compliance is not only a business interest, it's a personal interest. It funds our schools, our roads, our hospitals, and other critical public services that we all desire and need. And so I ask you, on that note, to please welcome Dr. Damian King, who will then share with you the findings, and thereafter, Mr. Hank Williams from the TAJ. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning. You don't really have to convince anybody of the importance of tax compliance. And of course, that's the reason why you're all here. But nonetheless, I would like to begin by making an even stronger case for the importance that you think you already appreciate. It is not an exaggeration to say that it is the ability to extract taxes from an economy that distinguishes economically successful countries. And the reason for that is that the prosperous countries in the world become so because of the support, because of the complementarity of their governments being able to provide public goods and services, being able to invest in and maintain infrastructure, and to fund security, and to be able to provide all of the goods and services that the private sector cannot. And to do that, it requires the ability to extract resources from the tax base. And countries that are not able to do that for whatever reason cannot be successful. So what we are talking about here is not just important from a narrow fiscal point of view. It is fundamentally important to a country that has a vision for economic growth, development, and prosperity. There are two approaches to taxation. One approach is to try to get compliance by enforcement. You might want to call that the stick. The other approach is to try to get enforcement by incentivizing voluntary compliance. And that's what we're going to refer to as the carrot. Using the approach of enforcement is costly. It's extremely costly because it requires a large amount of resources to be devoted to largely going after individual taxpayers. So you need a well-funded tax administration. And most importantly, you need an economy with relatively high incomes so that the taxes, so that when you get somebody because of enforcement, going from being non-compliant to non-compliant, going from non-compliant to compliant, the taxes that you get from those individuals make it worth the cost. This makes enforcement appropriate for economies that have lots of high incomes. This makes focusing on enforcement appropriate for relatively wealthy countries. Now, the other approach, which I imagine, 15, 20, 25 years ago, would have seemed to be almost unthinkable, is to get people to volunteer, to put up their hands and come in and say, oh, I have some money for you, here it is. The voluntary compliance approach is much cheaper, obviously, if your taxpayers are coming in on their own. And because it is cheaper, it really is more appropriate for countries that have fewer resources that they can devote to tax compliance and where incomes are generally low, and so the return to doing so is relatively small. It seems clear, therefore, that the approach that's more appropriate for a country like Jamaica is to focus on voluntary compliance. And that's how we are going to frame our discussion today. How do you incentivize an economically active population to voluntarily comply? Well, there are generally three activities, three approaches. The first one is simplification. Simplification of your tax structure so it is easier to navigate and people can more easily work out what it is they owe. The second is consolidation. To try to group the payments and what you need to do to be compliant into as few activities as possible so it becomes easier to comply. And the third one is facilitation. That the actions required to actually pay can be done as easily as possible. Do you need to fill out forms and then travel to different offices to be compliant, or can you go online, do 2 clicks, and your payment is done? That's how you go about getting compliance. Well, Tax Administration Jamaica has been, over the last several years, engaged in many of these activities. They certainly, from what we have seen in our analysis, have continued to engage in traditional enforcement efforts. Audits and inspections continue to take place. And amongst many other activities, they have also sought recently to gather more information to be the basis for traditional investigation and enforcement. And in that context, you now have the obligation to supply third-party information. But a lot of what has been taking place at tax administration, we have discovered, can be categorized as part of the shift towards voluntary compliance. Over the last several years, they have amalgamated the process of being compliant with a number of payroll taxes, NIS, NHT, education tax. We now have the business registration superform that is supposed to simplify, at least in terms of the interface, to simplify the process of registering a new business and therefore setting the platform for being compliant. Self-employed persons now can fill out a single super form, again, to be the basis on which they can become compliant. And of course, we have the new RAIS system, Revenue Administration Information System, or if you want to try to pronounce it, I will leave that to you. RAIS is the electronic platform for tax compliance. And through 3 phases now, the last phase was recently implemented and went live, includes your ability to satisfy many of the elements of compliance electronically. All of this, again, making it easier for those who would like to be compliant to do so. There is one umbrella under which we can put all of the voluntary compliance efforts of tax administration over the last several years. And this is a part that's really a revolution for those of us that think of tax compliance and taxation in the traditional way. It is the view that taxpayers are customers. It used to be that tax administration in a previous generation viewed paying taxes as something that people had to do. And there really was no reason for tax administration to be nice about it. It's something you were obligated to do. And the revolution started perhaps maybe 10 years ago. But really, I understand, became a strong focus around 5 years ago. To view the taxpayer as a customer, somebody whose business you wanted, and so therefore, someone who had to be catered to. You know, it's not very often that the Caribbean Policy Research Institute takes on a policy area and discovers that the relevant public agency is by and large doing what we would like them to do. That the voluntary compliance approach is what is appropriate for a country like Jamaica, for a country that doesn't have a lot of high incomes across the board. And that indeed has been the, tax administration in Jamaica has made this shift of focus towards voluntary compliance. So what's the problem? Why didn't we just, sort of send them a virtual pat on the back? And that was the end of that. We discovered that, by and large, there's a metaphor here that we could use. They are on the right. Thank you. The problem is that not a lot of these services, not a lot of these new facilities are being used by taxpayers. taxpayers, by and large, still don't know what to do. So clearly what tax administration in Jamaica needs to do is get out there and tell people what is going on, to spread the proverbial word that it is now easier to be compliant, it's now easier to file, it's now easier to pay your taxes. We conducted a survey to find out how much of the tax-paying and tax-owing public are aware of all of each of the new facilities and changes that has been taking place. And we found that with varying degrees of difference, by and large, most of the tax-owing public are unaware of most of the new measures. So we really ought to be asking the question, well, why hasn't tax administration been out there telling everybody what's going on? We also asked our survey respondents if these facilities were available, if these new measures came into being, are you more likely to be compliant? 86% of the non-compliant said a reduction in the number of payments would increase your likelihood of being compliant. 81% said that if they had the ability to manage their accounts online, they would become compliant. Both of these have taken place already. So why hasn't tax administration spread the word? Well, they have been. They've been using social media. They have implemented the STEP program to get information out through the schools. They have been conducting seminars and workshops and clinics, and engaging in partnerships with governmental and non-governmental organizations in order to carry out some of the workshops. That's a good way to get people to show up, to leverage existing organizations. In one particular instance, they have been partnering with the parish councils to hold workshops on being compliant with property taxes. And that effort actually has been particularly successful when you look at compliance rates for property taxes before and after the workshops are held on a parish-by-parish basis. And they have also, over the last several years, introduced many channels of customized communication. The large taxpayer office for large taxpayers, by which we mean taxpayers that earn a lot of income and therefore owe a lot of taxes, not large taxpayers in girth. They have also introduced taxpayer education officers whose obligation, in the same way that banks have to know their customers, their officers have to know their taxpayers, get familiar with the nature and kinds of businesses that they're engaged in, so that when they have communication with those taxpayers, they can facilitate how they can become compliant. There has been much effort on the part of TAJ to get the word out. Some of it has been successful. Some of it has not. Our survey revealed that the vast majority of taxpayers have never heard of a workshop or seminar or clinic put on by the tax administration. They don't know, they not only don't know that the tax changes have taken place, they don't know that the workshops that tell them about the tax changes are taking place. So we asked the survey respondents, what are the ways in which they have noticed tax administration has been communicating with them? It was almost all about traditional media, radio, TV, newspapers. All of the other means of communication were only seen by a small minority of taxpayers. Then we asked, well, how would you like to be communicated with? What is the way in which you want the information to come to you? And those results were slightly different. That the winning category is emails, because that is one that they are sure to see. Probably something for tax administration to take account of. We did another survey for another project where we asked of those who used e-filing to compare it to filing taxes the traditional way. And the response was that e-filing was far and away an easier process. Of those who actually engaged in e-filing and therefore had a basis for comparison, e-filing is easier. But for this survey, for this particular project, when we looked at, well, how do you actually file? We asked each business in the survey, how do you file? And we still had almost a half, 44% of businesses were still going out and collecting the forms from a tax office, not even downloading, manually collecting forms from a tax office to fill out. Only 37% of businesses were e-filing. So we asked, why are you not e-filing? And businesses said, well, they're just accustomed to doing it the old way. Okay, fine. 28% of them said it's too difficult. Well, we know it's not too difficult, because for the other survey, those who did both and had the basis for comparison said it was much easier. So the people in this survey who are saying it's too difficult is because they have not been made familiar with the process of e-filing. And of course, a handful don't even know about it. Internet access is not the problem. So again, this gives us pointers on where to go. The share of businesses that file, that e-pay, that pay their taxes online still remains small. But when we disaggregate it by size of business, we see the problem really is with micro businesses. Trying to get very small businesses to engage in electronic platforms is where the greatest return with compliance is to be had. Medium to large businesses have the resources to take on e-filing, and e-payment. Micro-businesses do not. And so the efforts at education and dissemination and facilitation would have to focus on micro-businesses. And for them, the payoff is going to be greatest because to begin with, they have the fewest resources to devote to filing and paying taxes. They don't have a whole floor of their 20-story headquarters devoted to compliance. That's where the greatest returns to efforts invested by the TAJ are to be had, and where the benefit is going to be greatest. So where does this leave us in terms of recommendations? Well, it is not unfair to say that the number one recommendation of the Caribbean Policy Research Institute, having looked at what is happening in the rest of the world, what are the best practices of the countries that have become more successful at doing this, reviewing what the tax administration in Jamaica has been doing over the last 10 years, that our number one recommendation is keep on doing what you're doing, Sammy. To continue the process of simplification, of consolidation, and facilitation. Much has been done, but it is all in the right direction and appropriate for Jamaica. To continue educating the tax administration staff not only about the tax processes and tax regime about which, that they're administering, but also in the shift towards caring for your customers. Most importantly, notwithstanding the tremendous effort at dissemination and education that has been taking place, most importantly, new ways of engaging the public, particularly small businesses, have to be identified. New, more clever ways. Because our survey says that there's a tremendous amount of ignorance about the new measures and new facilities that still exists. And to consider the possibility of new kinds of incentives. Maybe perhaps even differential rates, depending on use or non-use of the new facilities. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Damien, for carrying us through the key summary points of the research done by the team. And I encourage you all to read the thorough report, to go through in detail, to review the recommendations themselves, and of course consider and advocate for certain changes. May I now invite Mr. Hank Williams to join us from the TAJ. He is the Director of Strategic Services. Please, let's welcome him.
Dr. Marshall Hall, Chairman of the Caribbean Policy Research Institute, Executive Directors Dr. Damien King and Mrs. Imani Duncan Price, Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Let me firstly, on behalf of Tax Administration Jamaica, extend our profound gratitude, firstly to be invited to be a part of this event, and also congratulations on doing this piece of work to which we think is very important to shape policy and also tax administration going forward. Let me get comfortable with technology firstly. I'm having. Okay, great. Seeing like I was reaching somewhere a while ago. Having. Okay, good. For us at Tax Administration, we adopted the principle of we cannot do business the same way and expect the same result. Different result. Good, you're not sleeping. Good, thank you very much. Good. I feel happy. Give yourself a round of applause. You're not sleeping, you're listening to me very carefully. So for us, what we have done over the last few years, we have revolutionized our services. We have re-engineered our business processes. We have also taken a very strategic approach to engage our stakeholders because we think that is very important in the path to transforming tax administration in Jamaica in order to make it become a world-class tax administration. My presentation this morning will focus around the areas, firstly, of giving you a synopsis of the governance arrangement which exists in tax administration in Jamaica, as well as to give you an idea of our partnership arrangement and also to provide you with a brief outline of the major legislative changes that have allowed us to adopt the compliance model that we embrace now and raise. I'll do the pronunciation. Revenue Administration System, for us it's called RAISE. So the main objective of Tax Administration in Jamaica is to improve voluntary compliance and also to improve the ease of doing business, which is very critical in order to us to ensure that we embrace the corporate compliance model, which focuses, as you heard, enforcement, service, as well as education. So we have ensured that all the pillars of the compliance model is adopted along the continuum, and that is of registration, filing payment, and correct reporting. So in terms of the governance arrangement, what we have done is that we have promulgated legislation from far back as in 2003 to amalgamate, or we say to bring together three agencies. That is the Tax Appeals and Administration Department, the Tax Administration and Services Department, and we have also embraced the Inland Revenue Department. Bringing those three areas together, what we were able to do was to form the new Tax Administration Jamaica. The new Tax Administration Jamaica allows for a board of governance, a board of directors, a board of management to be put in place. And this is important in order to ensure that our operations are streamlined in such a way where there is greater focus on management. So there's a stronger focus on management. What we have done also as a new tax administration, when we are now a semi-autonomous revenue agency, and that allows us to fulfill our mandate of collecting domestic taxes. And this is important because what we have done is to ensure that we have done this in accordance with with the legislative changes and provisions that are in place, and also to ensure that we facilitate voluntary compliance, which is very important in order to reduce the cost of collecting taxes. So the main strategic objectives that this have allowed us to build our operations around. One is to improve compliance, and that is within the ambits of service, education, and enforcement. We have also looked strategically at modernizing the organization in terms of people, processes, technology, and the plant. We have looked, and we have seen that there is need for us to make significant changes, and we have done that. In terms of SARA, we have also, during the last year, recognized that as we move into this new organization, we have to retool our human resources in such a way where we have focused our priorities in ensuring that we aligned our human resources in such a way where we can maximize our service delivery. So the scope of our operations, as we have ensured to realize that we have broadened and also included various other domestic taxes, we have also looked primarily at operating as the primary collecting agency of the government in relation to taxes. And this have allowed us to also assume the responsibility of several other government agencies. In terms of the TRN, we have also had the TCC driver's license. We have ensured that we have continued to take full responsibility for providing these services. In terms of the corporate compliance model, we have seen it as a primary focus as we are looking forward to relook at our strategic objectives to ensure that the objectives that we have, as we are told, and we have realized, to look more at a more customer-centric focus. In terms of partnership, and this is something that Tax Administration Jamaica is very big on, we have partnered with several government agencies in order to amalgamate our transactions. You have heard earlier about our partnership with the Housing Trust in terms of ensuring that we have the single form. We have also ensured that in terms of, we have also consolidated our filing and payment arrangements, and also ensure that the systems that we have were able to deal with estimated tax returns. We have also allowed for a single point of registration for companies. We have all significant legislative changes have taken place in terms of the fiscal incentive regime. This is something that what we have done in order to drive the effort for compliance. We looked at the fiscal incentive program. We have also looked, as you heard earlier, at the third party. We have collecting of third-party information. And this is critical because we amended the Revenue Administration Act in order to ensure that we're able to receive information from all our partners and agencies that are critical in terms of to bolster voluntary compliance. We have also looked at the harmonization of penalties, and I'll speak a little bit more on this. We have also ensured that we have in place garnishment, that we can receive information, we can receive tax obligations. So this is important as I present to you this morning, to let you know that we have engaged various stakeholders, and we'll continue to, in order for persons to have a full appreciation of the impact that we have been doing and what we will be doing in the future. You heard about RAISE earlier. We have implemented RAISE in 3 phases. The first phase was for us a revolutionary one, in which we set out firstly to look at the consumption taxes. Then second phase, we look at our income tax and other critical taxes that is important in terms of payroll. Finally, we looked at the phase in which we looked at the stamp duty transfer taxes, and also in terms of our betting and gaming and lotteries taxes. So we have ensured that we have looked at those taxes. So we have broadened the base, and we are now able to capture all of tax types in this new platform. Critical also is with the introduction of a revenue administration system. Various tax types have made simpler for the public, and this has allowed for online filing as well as online payment. And we are committed to strengthen our web services, and will continue to look for ways in which we can improve the efficiency of tax administration. We have received several feedback from our stakeholders in terms of how is it that we have been able to advance the services that we provide in less timely manner by way of our offices. And I'll point you to a few here in terms of services that we have made simpler. We have allowed persons to generate the statement of accounts. We have also allowed for verification of tax withholding or zero-rated entities. Persons have also been able to submit the TCC application, and also verification checks can be done. As you see also, we have granted access to a third party that they can able to view accounts for verification purposes. As also filing payment history can be viewed, application for income tax exemptions. So as you see, we have a gamut of services that we have allowed by way of our e-channel. As I move on, I'll allow for us to look at a further step that we have gone to deliver our services. The third phase of RAISE, which was rolled out on September 15th, 2016, involves services, stamp duty. We also looked at and transfer taxes. The withholding taxes were covered in that regard. Betting, gaming, and lotteries. And the discussions have continued with our stakeholders, and today is one of such. Because for the month of September, our Commissioner General has led our senior management team on what we call September on the road. We have engaged various stakeholders to ensure that they are aware of our changes, and this includes the financial sector, the legislative fraternity, as well as our contractors and various other stakeholders. We have also embarked on a series of consultations, and this will continue as we ensure that our agenda for September will not only stop in September, but will continue the process of educating the public. The successes that we have had so far. Just to give you a brief synopsis of the successes that we have had so far. Tax Administration Jamaica has gained immensely from the implementation of our revenue administration system. With a project which is now practically completed, we are better positioned to administer taxes and to integrate with various other systems. For example, our partner agency, the Jamaica Custom Agency. Their system, ASICUDA, we're able to share information across platforms. Particularly here, our end-to-end case management is critical in terms of our compliance as well as our arrears management. We have also allowed for us to generate our management reports much easier in real time. The commissioner can stay in his office and look at the collections. We're able to look to ensure that we are on track. And as you will all can attest, you have heard in the media, we are on track in terms of revenue collection because we are ensuring that the voluntary compliance is bolstered and maintained in terms of real time with our data. Critical also, we have been able to send notice and letters. These are generated automatically. Also critical tool that we have developed, three critical components here. We have what we call analytics tool. And this allows us to have some predictive models that we are able to look, for example, at compliance, that we can identify our taxpayers which we need to take actions against, that we need to ensure that we are able to collect taxes that are owing. Critically also, we have a data warehouse in which we are, the third-party data, we have been able to pull out information together. So we are able to, one, share the information and also better positioned to execute our compliance program. Critically also, we have the discovery. And the discovery is really a data matching tool. It has allowed us to match the third-party information, various stakeholders. So when we have our compliance programs, they are targeted in terms of the approach that we take. As I go on, the benefits of the change, very critical to us, and the feedback, as I said, are tremendous. There are wider access to a range of services. And critically, when we look at our data, we have recognized in terms of e-registration, we're up by over 100%. In terms of e-payment, 70%. So in terms of the access, we have seen that there's a take-up with the service. The amalgamation with various agencies, critical again. And also, we have recognized through this enhanced strategy that we have put in place, there are cost savings from the various online options for persons. You're able, instead of going to the journey to the tax office, you can do your transaction from the ease of your home. We have also recognized that there's tax saving from being compliant because persons know, in terms of the penalty regime that is there, you're able now to access your information and to make your payments in real time. We have also, that's from the business standpoint. From us as TAJ, again, a lot of these benefits are reciprocal in terms of what we have seen. And we're also, what is good for us is that the tax earning by way of compliant action is very good. As I say, we are on track in terms of our projections, and this is pretty good in terms of ensuring that we meet our revenue targets. Again, I like the figures here that we can see it for ourselves, is that so far we had met our targets last year, and up to July of this year, our net collection stands at 6% above the projected target. And as of August, and we are determined to ensure that we continue on this path throughout the rest of the fiscal year and as we move forward. Critically also, in terms of our compliance strategy that we have embraced, as I spoke earlier, is that there has been positive, and this has been supported by our third-party information that we have received, and we have garnishment. We have also, as I said, in terms of the penalty regime, which we harmonized, $5,000 for late payments in terms of how we have streamlined. We have also ensured that we have our taxpayer education trust, and that continues with a strong focus on e-services. Because again, our aim is to ensure that we, as we say, free up the space in our banking halls. It's key to ensure that we offer our services in such a way that it costs the government less, because the more offices we build, is the more the overhead expenditure that we have. Yes, in terms of as I said, our senior leadership speaking group continues in terms of engaging key businesses, professional association, to ensure that we spread the message, as we have heard that we need to continue, and we're going to push ahead to ensure that this continues. Again, we are going to ensure that the e-filing center at Constant Spring continue to be functional, and we roll out accordingly. Critical also in terms of court actions. Now that we have the third-party information, and we are generating these e-statements, we need to ensure that we follow through with court actions, which is required at the end of the spectrum in which persons are not willing to pay. So that's critical also. In terms of recognition, I'm happy to say that we we have been recognized by the World Bank Ease of Business Doing Report. We have been recognized for continued improvement. We have also have been recognized for the taxpayer education model which we embrace, and that is a STEP program which was spoken of earlier, which we have adopted from the OECD, and it was seen as a good practice. We have also, in terms of the IMF Tax Administration Diagnostic Assessment, which we call TADAT, which was done last year. Jamaica was one of 13 countries which have been able to benefit from this form of assessment. And this is a look at the internal health of the organization. We got a B rating for voluntary compliance. And I'm happy to say a B+. But what we have done is that we have spent time to really look at our corporate and strategic plans to ensure that the recommendations were given to us, that we have moved forward to ensure that we adopt those. So we expect bigger and better things going forward. We have also been able to share our TAJ taxpayer education, not only locally, but regionally, internationally. Our Commissioner General was away recently, last week, sharing in terms of the work that Jamaica has done, because we are seen as a pioneer by many other countries. Last year, Turks and Caicos was here because to them, it's very important that they benefit from us in terms of and strengthening their tax administration systems. And as I draw to a close, I put here in terms of our contacts, feel free, and I ask that you pass these on to persons so they are aware of all the services that we offer and the offerings. Thank you very much.